Welcome here to our first panel, Building a Resilient Europe, Challenges and Risks. And allow me to give you some intro words into it in terms of in what world we are. We are currently confronted with multiple crises. And we must see that such crises we have not seen 2-3 years ago, on one side. On the other side, we have increasing tremendous speed in technology development, quantum computing, neuromorphic computing, AI, and so on. So both parts are extremely challenging. So first, we need to manage crisis. On the other side, we need to take really smart decisions in what to invest and use the crisis, somebody says never miss a crisis, really to develop new stuff and really to make resilient Europe. And the point is also that we need to be more resilient. Dependence is never good. We already at the first or second term of Concordia, we set European digital sovereignty, important part. Either we name it strategic autonomy or digital sovereignty. The idea is really to be more independent. Dependence is never good. And so it's also the part that we need to start bringing European industry up and trying to be more independent in this part. So the question we are discussing here now today is how we can achieve this. How to make Europe more resilient, not just energy part, oil, gas, and so on, but also from the IT perspective. And Europe has done the EU Cyber Resilience Act in terms of providing to go in this direction, make parts more resilient. But the question which I would like to discuss with my colleagues here and in Brussels, how far are we? What are the steps? What are the recommendations? What do we need to do to go there? And so also to provide support, information also for the policy decision makers, to the politics to say what should we do to get more resilient. So as I said, nice to have you here all, and I would like just to give my colleagues 5 minutes for a statement in terms what are their opinions here. And I would stay with Evangelos, Europe from ENISA.
Thank you, Gabi. So my name is Evangelos Ouzounis. I'm very glad to be here today with you, and I would like to thank Gabi, that I know for many years, for the kind invitation. Concordia is one of the important projects in the cybersecurity research area. And it started with lots of expectations, and I'm very pleased to see that concludes with spectacular results and achievements. So today I'm representing ENISA and the EU Cybersecurity Agency, most of you probably you know, and I'm head of policy development and implementation, leading the work in the ENISA directive, the critical sectors. So resilience is an important component, of our work. We have done a lot of work over the last 10 years in this field, and the last 2 years we realized that more work needs to be done, especially the last 6 months. Member states actually become more and more, let's say, responsible. They take ownership, they develop their own structures. The policy area, the policy initiatives of the European Union, like the ENISA directive, helped a lot. We see now in every member state having a cybersecurity strategy. There is a cybersecurity center. There are a lot of initiatives, sometimes capacity building initiatives like trainings and exercises. We see also regional developments. There is a lot of cooperation between public and private sector through information sharing. So we can be proud of ourselves, that Europe as a continent is quite ahead. Still, there are obviously a lot of things to be done to protect our assets, our critical services, and also, to understand our position in the world and identify opportunities, for growth. And as was said before, we might be, big in our own microcosm, but apparently we are not so big, you know, in the whole world. And we have to understand this and also take advantage of our, you know, skills and capabilities, the talents and the innovation that and the research results that Europe produces over the years, not only in cybersecurity but in many other fields, and see why the commercialization of these results is not, you know, I wouldn't say failing, but it doesn't, you know, produce the results that we all expect. There are some notable examples, like, you know, Munich and Bavaria, but it's very hard to find, you know, such kind of spots, you know, elsewhere, you know, in Europe. And maybe, you know, having such kind of discussions here, you know, and mingle with the people that made it, you know, can help us, you know, understand the problem. So I'm very glad to be with you, and thank you very much for the opportunity. Back to you, Gabi.
Thank you, Evangelos. Helmut, you have 30 years more than experience in IT technology, and you're from Austrian Institute of Technology. What is your observations?
So, first of all, thank you very much that I can be here with you at this honorable panel. It's really amazing. And thank you very much for the invitation and the question. And 5 minutes is not too much, but I try to be short enough to give an answer on this very important question. Also, what I would like to share with you my experience in working the last 30 years. So I'm not a scientist born, I would say. I was 20 years in industry. First was a big manufacturer, then was a big service operator, always in the digital domain. And so I was watching more or less my career the last 30 years, how the internet came to Europe, how we built broadband, how interactive TV, now it's YouTube called, and all this stuff. So I was observing it. I was part of this community. And the last 12 years, I'm with AIT, the largest Austrian applied research center. And I must say, we are, especially in this round here, and with all these people, we are the smallest ecosystem. So I have now a team of 200 experts, and we get some money. It's big for Austria, but in the worldwide, if I see the billions in Europe or in China, it's neglectable money. But nevertheless, I'm proud, the last 10 years, and I can spend here now at least 1 hour explaining you that we were able to develop solutions, I would say, marketable products, leading edge, ahead of the pack. I'm proud to it. I compare myself with my team on Google, MIT, between China and America. We can do it. So it's not about millions at the end. It's about people which are ambitious, sitting together, and have a will and can do something. So for me, innovation happens in the heads of the people, and it can happen everywhere. Not just size and just billions are at the end the solution, because also if you have a lot of money, you need the people which have to do it. So it's there, we can do it. But what we need and what the problem is, and that's for me the two big messages I would like to share with you. We can spend a lot of even more research than scientists if we are not able to build at the same time an ecosystem that those scientists are developing something, companies are around, potent companies which are then building products, and they're able also to go on a market, on a worldwide market. It's useless at the end. So this building up this ecosystem is crucial. And here we are, I would say, as a nutshell, as a message, a little bit lousy in Europe. We believe it will happen somehow, but we do not spend enough attention. On the one hand, the private market, which is rule, but on the other hand, also when it goes, especially in many areas, especially in the security domain, we are very much dependent on the public administration. It's security is a monopoly at the end of the society and the administration. So if they are not part of this innovation system, it's a little bit difficult. And let's all together, so I claim it's my experience in the last 30 years, I believe we have in Europe brilliant researchers, scientists, wonderful projects, organizations, but what we don't have together, enough self-confidence that we believe in our own competence that we can build something. And so it comes very often in my experience, why are you doing this? This has already been developed in China or in America, or Google should have done it. Again, no, it's not there. They didn't have the idea, they didn't have the competence. We have it. Help me to bring it out into the world. And that's my biggest impact, what I learned over the last 30 years. This is the biggest hurdle, what I believe we have in Europe. We do not believe that we are able to build it. At the end, so I just would like to confirm what you said before, we have to bring people together. Innovation happens not in money, innovation between heads and brains, between people. And if they come together and know what they want to do, we can build something. And that's for me the big, as a representative of an applied researcher, the big message, let us do something together, we can do it at the end.
Okay, thanks, Helmut. But if it's just only the belief, I think we can work on this.
Exactly.
Okay, so Martin, maybe to your part. You are the head of Sector for Cybersecurity Industry Innovation at DG Connect. What are your observations?
Yeah, good morning, Gabi, and good morning, fellow panelists, and good morning, Concordians. First of all, thanks for the invitation. My apologies for not being able to come over to Munich. I would have loved to drink from one of these beer mugs. For me, this is also a great occasion. I've been part of this journey of which also led to the setting up of Concordia and the other pilot projects from the start. So for me, it's also a great occasion to see what came out of Concordia, and maybe we can also then in the discussion discuss a little bit about what might come next after the Concordia and the other pilot projects. So regarding the challenges that we face in Europe, I think many have already been mentioned by most speakers so far. So, but just to recap on a few, we have supply chain security challenges. We have an expanding attack surface. We have ever more connected devices. We have the advent of quantum computing, which threaten, legacy crypto. We have a huge challenge when it comes to awareness for cybersecurity needs in general, and this is also what the Minister of State already mentioned. But then we also have a huge shortage of really top cybersecurity experts. So at both ends of the spectrum, there's a skills challenge. In general, when it comes to organizations, so companies, but also public administrations or other entities, there's an issue with building capacity and building resilience and integrating cybersecurity into their core operations. We have an issue around information sharing, so sharing between member state authorities about information related to cybersecurity risks and incidents. And the same goes for information sharing within the private sector and between the private and the public sector. And then we also have a huge challenge when it comes to the commercialization of the know-how and the research, the excellent research which we have in Europe. This is also what Helmut just mentioned. So when these are the identified challenges, at EU level, we have let's say a toolkit of how to address different challenges. The toolkit at the moment is kind of expanding, it's pretty dynamic, but roughly speaking, what we have is regulation. And the ENISA directive has been mentioned, and this regulation which basically targets and puts obligation on member state authorities. There's also regulation which put obligations on market actors. So again, ENISA directive, the recently proposed Cyber Resilience Act, and the certification framework, which is now in place. Apart from regulation, there are also softer tools to foster cooperation within Europe. You might be familiar with the work which has led to the adoption of the 5G security toolbox, which addresses an issue, which goes back to the supply chain issue and the IoT and the expanding attack surface, but where there was a more voluntary and a less, not a regulatory approach, but nevertheless, I think over the years, we have managed to foster a shared view between member states about how to deal with the issue. And then last but not least, there's public funding from the EU level and from the member states level. and also regional. We have supported research and innovation for a very long time. And Concordia is one of the most visible of our research and innovation projects. We also have a new program which is called Digital Europe, which basically comes in where the research ends, meaning it's supposed to build the capacities on the application side. It's supposed to foster innovation and take research to the market, and it's supposed to support skills and let's say cybersecurity infrastructures. And then in relation to these funding instruments, we have also developed an ecosystem approach where we want to manage these two funding programs together with our member state authorities and with our community, of which Concordia is a very visible, let's say, part and predecessor of the eventual community. So we try to put in place this ecosystem approach. In general, the policy landscape is quite dynamic. It's becoming more complex. So there's also a matter of managing different fora, interactions between different, let's say, member state, groupings, interactions between different ways we interact with the market. But it's a very interesting and it's a very dynamic place, EU in cybersecurity. I concur with Evangelos. I think we've come a long way. We're in a good spot, but we can also certainly do better. Thanks again for the invitation and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you very much. And Ralf, last but not least, what are your thoughts about it? How to get resilient?
Yeah, well, you opened a very big array. And if I, let's say, build on what the previous speakers has been saying, then, and maybe adding to, when you run a company, you have a certain routine, right? And typically you start looking on where you stand. When we look on where we stand in Europe, again, to what I said in the opening, look at two things. Money spent in R&D and technology, and maybe a new view now is what's the military spend? Because we see in both areas global peaks. Every year, global R&D and technology spend is rising. Typically rising more than the accumulated GDP in the world. And it's 2021 numbers, and they're pretty accurate, I guess, is that China, for the very first time, took over the United States in spending on R&D and technology. It is an estimated $620 million, whilst the US stands at about 600. Germany, for example, spends about 130, 135, but Europe altogether 500. So I think there is two messages for us, I think, right? The first message is, there are two countries, the United States and China, dominating more than half of the technology and R&D spend. Of course, they are dominant. They have very strong home markets with a little, let's say, more unified legislation than we have in Europe. But the second message is, we have the money. We have over 500 billion we are spending in technology and R&D. So if somebody says we have no funds, it's nonsense, I think. We have the money, and we have the brains. We have shortage of brains. Frankly speaking, the United States and China too. They have shortage of people. But we know it because we are active in most of the countries, and we see that we not just see in Europe people shifting and drifting, and also that there's a shortage of highly skilled people. It's the same in the other countries too. So same basic, let's say, conditions for everyone. So we have it in our hands. But when you run a company, you typically look, okay, when you stand there, so what do you do then? So practically speaking, from a competitive area, there is, from a money perspective, funding perspective, no disadvantage. But I was getting very upset in a panel I have been sitting a year back or so, when somebody, I'm sorry, it was from the European Commission, said that we are very good in regulation in Europe. Right? And I say, oh, that cannot be. It cannot be that the United States innovates, that China duplicates and in the meantime innovates, and that Europe regulates. That's, if we're only good in regulation, then we're missing something. Then we're missing the bridge between the policy making and the implementation, between science and making innovation out of what we have invented, right? And that, I believe, is the biggest hurdle in Europe, that we talk a lot, that we must have formats like this, right? But we must get things on the ground. So there's two things on my wish list: that we have a much stronger vision of where we want to be from an endpoint perspective. So where is this continent by the end of this decade? Technology-wise, industry-wise, because we should have an interest that we have a strong industry also in IT, in technology, in cyber, in most of the areas, right? Because without that, we never become resilient and also to a certain way independent, right? And when we have that vision, also have a very clear roadmap how you do things. Implementation is by nature the most difficult thing, right? Because why do you need a strategy when you not execute it? And if you only talk about execution without strategy, is quite aimless, right? So bringing these points together, my point would be, we have it all in Europe. We have the brains, we have the heart, we have the money. We lack the vision and that path for implementation. That would be my wish. It doesn't make us independent from the very first day, but gradually developing that would be possible. I think it's possible.
Oh, that's good. Because
sorry for.
Martin is making all notes, providing then to the information then to the Commission. I could just second this, because if we compare, for example, largest company by market cap, we see that US is dominating the top 100. And the difference was not so big in 2012. So 10 years ago, it was not such big as we have it now. And if you see that, just Tesla is marketing up and is worth as the next 10 most valuable global automakers combined, then we see that we have to do something. But the good thing is, you say we can do it. We both there a couple of years at a Commission event for quantum computing on the panel. And Khalil Rouhana said that time all the research came for quantum computing from Europe. But the computers are coming from the US. So he sees exactly what Ralf said, that we have the brains, we do research, but we do not development in terms of bridging the gap. And I think the crisis that we are now facing are also opportunities. Opportunities to say, let's do it different. Evangelos, do you see it the same? What opportunities do we have? What do we have to do?
Indeed, we realize that we are behind in a lot of important, let's say, leading markets. Okay, we have lost, the smartphones. We have lost the devices, the smart devices, displays. We are losing, maybe, I hope not, the electricals industry, hopefully not, this is getting very competitive. Tesla has a lot of financial capacity, to buy out European players. And we have to sit down and reflect, what it means, for our economy, for our society. And cybersecurity is definitely an important component in two directions. First, to protect our assets, make our economy, our democracy, our society, functioning, but also as a market, as an opportunity for us. On the first part, surprisingly and very unfortunately, we see that big players don't invest a lot on cybersecurity in Europe, if we compare them with US, for example. So still there is, hesitation. The boards, don't understand the problem. If they invest, they wait for a regulation, to force them, to do that. They don't see this, as an opportunity for diversifying in the market and offering, value-added products. Security maybe is not something that the customer will pay for. And we end up, with a lot of problematic products in the market, digital products. And I think that the CRA comes, to fix a problem like this. In the other direction, we see a lot of innovative startups, coming up in Europe on cybersecurity. We see a lot of innovation, but the culture and the mentality of these startups is, to build up 100, 200 people company, and then maybe look for an investor in the US, to sell it, and then, buy maybe a nice red Ferrari. So we have this difficulty, of going from these 200 people, to 2,000 people, and from 2,000 people maybe to 20,000 people. And of course, we are not one single market yet. We are working towards this direction, and there are different regulations, and there are different languages and different cultures. So this makes, the whole endeavor more difficult. But we see a lot of progress, and I'm personally very, very optimistic. And I think projects like this help us, to understand the opportunities of coming together, developing ecosystems. You have presented so very nice, interesting ideas. Some of them can end up into becoming a business model, a service, a product. And I know that for researchers it's not easy to do this click, going from research to commercialization. I was myself many years researcher, and I was lost into, this research and the priorities of research. But that's why having this interaction, this discussion between industry and research is absolutely a priority. And, by bringing these communities together, maybe some chemistry can happen, and chemistry always helps, to bring new products on the market. So I'm optimistic by character, but also because of the situation.
Gabi, I could add something here.
Please.
If okay. I have a mic here. Well, maybe to explain a little bit of how we try to tackle what you just said. As a company, we have the same issue, right? We have product areas which require a lot of innovation. And you have to be willing to cannibalize your own products. If you don't do that, from physical to digital, then you miss maybe the boat anyway. But having said that, there is so much innovation out in this area that we have decided to build a fund, a G&D supported fund. It's called the Trust Tech Fund for Trusted Technologies. It's only in the cybersecurity area. It's only in areas where we are active, but we seek new solutions. And so we are not that large, right? We are not Apple, we are not Tesla. We are 12,000 people now. We run through 2.5 billion. So we say, well, how can we fund that as a company? Because you can do R&D, you can do M&A, and you can do venturing. But you can spend the euro only once. Right? Because part of that thing is how larger companies also support the, let's say, small company development, the venture area. So we were looking for a partner, a co-investment facility. So we found a partner, and it's the European Investment Bank. So for each euro we invest, the European Investment Bank invests the other euro. So we have a certain fund size, so we can facilitate 15, 20, 25 startups in the area of trusted technologies, adding to our portfolio. And for us, it's a super research of what's going on in the landscape of innovation. Because simply we have to recognize, maybe we have good products, but there is plenty of good ideas out there. And because it's a European investment, we focus on Europe. European investment stands for Europe, EU27, so we invest in EU27 countries, so across Europe. And it's not just a fun exercise to do that, because always I look at the deal flow memos, right, I get from the ventures team, because they see what kind of startups. And what I can say is there is a lot of startups, and they miss what you say, scale. Right? Because United States, large market, China, large market. China is a super venture market at the moment. They invest a lot of money in China. United States, very big tickets. In Europe, often it lacks the scaling effect, right? And that's the reason why what you said, opening the markets would be very important, that we have new technologies being better able to scale. Otherwise, we remain with small-scale solution. We maybe have super solutions, but maybe they're only small scale. They never grow to a Tesla size.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So scaling, Helmut, is an issue. how to do it.
So since I'm representing the researchers, I can a little bit discuss with the industry side, allow me. I fully agree with what you said. We need a European open market. I observed this the last 12 years. It's very difficult to start with as a startup, and then we have more than 20 countries, different languages also an issue. It's very difficult. It's much easier to do the same in the US, and immediately you have 20,000 customers in big US, native English speaking, and then you have some income and the startup can grow, which cannot in Europe. But there is a second issue which I would like to highlight and build on my previous sentence or my previous statement. We're discussing about security. Security is part of digitalization, so it's both for digital and for security. I think the biggest point is we have to understand altogether, it's, I believe, not about technology. So we have this big area in the CHIPS Act, we're discussing, do we have technology competences for producing something? Of course, that's one area of discussion. We need machines, we need experts to build really high tech. But when I see it, take more general, the digital issue, the security issue, for me, it's not the technology side. It's at the end, we have to understand, it's about digital transformation. It means it's changing of processes in the organization, but also in our community as private users and also as business users. And this is something which is so crucial from my point of view, goes wrong. Also, security context, many customers, operators, sometimes business customers are looking for build a box and then my company is secure. No, you have to do in the whole organization a change of thinking, a change of working. You have to do it. And let me just give one example for the younger people. I'm a little bit older, but in 2004, I was with a large telecom operator. In 2004, it was before YouTube time. I think many people here don't understand there was a time before YouTube. So YouTube was not in the market. We already equipped in small Austria a whole village of 7,000 people, fully covered with broadband access, and we provided them with cameras, and they did a community TV. At that time, I was traveling through the whole world. I was presenting, we have the first village of doing community TV. I didn't get any support from any kind of commercial actor in Austria, in Europe, on the political level. Everybody was claiming, oh, that's a crazy guy, you cannot earn money. We need cost efficiency. We also in that time in the operator side, we are introducing new technology just to become more efficient, to get rid of people. That's okay, that's fine, but I think that's not the future. We have to rethink that's not only about efficiency. We have to think about new approaches, changes of processes, business changes, all what we experience now with Twitter and all the social media stuff, and also with Google and all these big companies, also with cloud, is changing of way of working. And here we need a better understanding. So it's not about technology, it's about how can we use it. Funding is there. I fully agree with you. I have no problem with funding. People are also there. What I really allow, I think I can say here at this round, even though it's public, but the public administration in Europe as innovative user is completely missing. They do not play the role. So there is public money, but they do not play the role. And also, to some extent, helping startups, helping research activities by an industry consortium. Let us do something for the global world. It's very hard for us. That's not something what scientists can do. Here, in a much better understanding, we have to do it somehow different together. Otherwise, we will not be able to being successful in the global market.
So, next question, of course, to Martin. So we see it's a technology problem. Well, yes or not a little bit. We need startups. We need actual unicorns. And we have luck to have in Concordia 2 unicorns. But we need more of them. And they should not be bought and or sold to the US. So how is the European Commission try to handle this? Do you have a solution, not just to fund research, but maybe fund more startups, have funds like Ralf said on the big European scale, and then also to have some limitations in terms to say that they are not allowed to be sold if they are big and innovative ideas to the US? What do you think?
Yes, so Gabi, the short answer is yes.
Good.
Well, I can elaborate a bit, but I also want to recap a little bit on the discussion so far. I think, so I think we're zeroing in on a certain kind of shared understanding on the fact that scale is an issue, even though the EU is about creating an internal market. Formally, we think we have broken down all formal barriers to the internal market, including when it comes to cybersecurity products and services. But de facto, we know that we do not have the same scale and the same ease of moving between national markets as in China and the US, where it's just really one market and one language. So, but I'm also really looking forward to concrete suggestions about, you know, what more to do there, also on a regulatory side. The innovation, I think the innovation, I mean, the concrete innovation, you know, the concrete developments which lead to scaling up of companies, which lead to, you know, new business models really breaking through, like the Austrian example, which did not make it, but which might have should have. I don't think it will come from the public sector, and not necessarily the public sector in Brussels. It's what we can do is we can create framework conditions for others to work within. So just very concretely, what we are now trying to do with the European Cybersecurity Competence Center and the network of national coordination centers, we're trying to develop a strategy and agenda which hopefully, you know, can fulfill the function of the big vision that was mentioned before. But of course, it's Europe. It's a long process. We want to integrate all stakeholders. It's public, it's private, it's geographical balance. So it will take some time. Maybe it will not be short and snappy, but then at the end, we will come out with something which is hopefully both consensual and actually visionary. And again, we're creating these structures for these processes to take place. So we have, let's say, the forum where we discuss with the member state authorities, which manage part of or much of the public spending. And we will have a strategic advisory group where, you know, wise men and women can come together representing industry, the application side, civil society, and academia. So again, I understand our role here in trying to create framework conditions. And then Gabi, to the concrete question at the end about are we going to support startups and scale-ups in cybersecurity in Europe? I cannot tell you completely yes yet, but last week we were in Luxembourg with the Vice President of the European Investment Bank, who presented a study by the European Investment Bank exactly about the funding gap between, when it comes to venture capital, and the funding gap between startups and scale-ups in Europe as compared to the US and other geographies. And of course, you know, the analysis is clear. Okay, there's very good talent, but there's not enough equity around. There's not enough venture capital around. What can we do? So now again, we're entering into a process where there are potentially, you know, European pots of money, and there are actors, namely the European Investment Bank and the European Investment Fund. And we will see to what extent we can set something up which is dedicated for cybersecurity. And this could, in the end of the day, this could look like a fund of funds or a co-investment facility. But this is in the future. Huh? What we now have basically agreed on is the analysis. There's an interesting new study by the EIB published last week. And now we will enter a new discussion. And again, we will do it in the same fora and with the involving the stakeholders that I mentioned before. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Martin. Allow me to add a question. We need to be fast and agile, and something along discussions are maybe good in times where we don't have crisis as we have it now, multiple crises. Now maybe we need to make a new work style in terms maybe not to go to all member states, so other forms of discussions and other forms of coming to conclusions and to strategic way in much more faster way. So because Europe is known as regulator, but I think it's necessary that Europe becomes also known as an industry player. As we heard yesterday from Mr. Ischinger from the Munich Security Conference, if Europe is not playing a role in the big geographical situations, then we have a problem as Europeans. So allow me to add, to make more processes more faster, more agile, more strategically come faster to the conclusion, and as Ralf said, think from the end to the back, where do we want to be in, few years.
No, but I really like to encourage what you said on the, let's say, the co-investment facility released a lot of energy in our ventures team because they can actually spend twice. There's a very, let's say, agile coordination process with the EIB, with the European Investment Bank, and I think it can be a bridge of generating private money in conjunction with public money. I think it's a very good idea. And if we find, let's say, 10 more companies and have the volume of 10 times, then we have supported already, let's say, 200 or 250 startups. So, and that can be easily generated. And I'm sure you will find other companies.
So Martin, this was an encouragement. So proceed agile and fast to this part. Oh. Helmut? Helmut, maybe you want to comment?
Yeah, let me take this opportunity to add here something which was not yet brought up, which I would like to mention, but I think it's important. So basically, full agreement. We need research, we need startups, we can do something. But something else is going on when we came now, I think, after the infrastructure period, what we had, building up cables and fiber and all this stuff 20 years ago. Now we have some kind of switches, IT equipment. We are now on this data level. We are producing data and we are sharing it. And only a handful of companies in the world, none of them are from Europe, are dealing with all our data. So when we go back on this now digitalization third level, now what's going on? Do we have control over our data? It's now about security, privacy, all this stuff is coming up. And if I just, let me take this example, share with you my experience when Corona started, where the whole scientific Europe, all the researchers and big communities tried to produce a technical solution. At the end, it wasn't feasible. We didn't come to a European conclusion. We were not able to trust or to bring the civilist, the whole community, the non-research and non-technical community, the public opinion in the field that it does make sense to think about next generation high-tech IT solution. I'm talking about this Corona app and all this stuff. A full failure. But what did Europe at the end? At the end, we were trustful that Apple and Google were doing it because they built it in their operating system. Suddenly, all the problem was gone. Isn't it crazy? It's unbelievable for me. We were not able to discuss because, of course, it's critical. It's all about this privacy issue. It is a critical issue. It's not a research issue. It's not a scientific problem. It's a problem that we have in the community. Where is the discussion right now? Just saying we do not want to have it, and then we have one company in the world which have all our data. That's not my answer for privacy preserving solution. So we need a discussion. I think beside this scientific research and market approach and activities, we need something not to lose our users at the end, that they trust on our own solution, that we are able to build. I believe that we can build solutions and services which are privacy preserving and which are helping our needs and our daily problems in the business and the private world. But we have to work on this. We need new technology, and this will then be the drivers when we have here the market. We are building then the market that we can build solutions. Otherwise, we are just not doing it, and we let it somewhere else in the world, which doesn't take any care about our privacy and all this stuff. So that's a big example where public authority or our regulation at the end, I would say, is the big market driver, which we have to bring it into field again, and it will not happen just bottom up.
If I may add to this, we have experienced 20 years ago, what South Korea was doing, in particular sectors. So they were putting their money, all their money, in 2-3 particular sectors, semiconductors, smart TVs, displays at that time, and cars. And they were ignoring other areas where basically, we in Europe consider important. So this is something also important. We have a tendency in Europe to spread thin, cover many areas, but not going too deep into these areas. And by the time we have a solution, we realize maybe that there is a lot of innovation out there. Our products might not be very competitive, and there are cheaper solutions, and that's it. So we lost yet another opportunity. So what I think is important also to reflect, about the priorities of 2035, 2040 maybe, and see what is absolutely important for Europe, where Europe can become a major player, and maybe, instead of going spread thin and covering 200 areas, maybe we cover only 10 areas. And in these 10 areas, maybe we put all our energy or our effort, and try to make, world champions. And then let's see what happens, because the scale of the problem will increase. Then the capacities of these companies, will become bigger and bigger. The market capitalization of these companies will increase exponential. So what we see 10 years later, from 12 to 22, maybe in 2032 will be even more. So this means that these companies will have the financial capacity to buy out any competitor, and sustain their market leadership, for the years to come. So it's very important to realize this, that we have to act. And of course, it's a research issue, it's a regulatory maybe issue, it's a market capital deployment issue. It's a cultural issue as well, for the people to understand, about the importance of entrepreneurship and taking, the risk to do stuff. So many aspects, but it is, the only thing that we have at our disposal, because Europe is becoming very expensive. We cannot produce clothes anymore, we cannot, we have to be on the leading edge in technology. Otherwise, we are going to be only, users and, offering touristic products and nice attractions. That will not be very sustainable. And I can have a lot of examples of, empires that have been disappeared, and because they didn't manage well.
So I think we need to move out of the comfort zone.
Yes, we have, yes.
And do some to prevent Europe as a digital colony. What are the areas? What are the areas which is where we should concentrate on?
I don't know, but I'm coming from cybersecurity, and I think cybersecurity might be the one. Might be one, because we have a lot of knowledge and expertise. We have a lot of interesting projects. It's an area that is still emerging. I don't see a big major cybersecurity player, around. And if we act quickly, we might be able to create one. I know that, players like Microsoft and others are capitalizing their, market position to offer cybersecurity services. But a lot of people now would like to have a third-party independent cybersecurity provider, and that might be our opportunity. So I'm sure that in other sectors, I don't know, nanoelectronics, displays, renewable energy sources, there might be opportunities like this, but I'm not the right expert definitely to express a view.
Okay. Helmut, what sectors would you say? Where should we concentrate?
So let me start, since we're in the cybersecurity context, I would underline, I think this is a very crucial starting point. Why? Since I'm 30 years working in the IT sector, the summary is we're still building today IT as we have done it 30 years ago, in principle. Now we can discuss it, but in principle. We are writing lines of code. In a car, we have nowadays 100 million lines of code in a modern car. It's unbelievably complex. The predictions are going to billions lines of code. No engineer will really understand what he has built there. It's an unbelievably complex system. So, and in the privacy context, I also mentioned before, we are just sending data somewhere around. It's always there. Everybody can read it, and we try by laws and rules to protect our data. So the next generation should be technically built in. So it's by design, security, privacy by design. There is a huge amount of work to be done that we can build next generation digital systems, and the whole world will need it. So this will be a very good starting point, because that's for me the underlining factor for our next generation digital autonomy. We have to have systems that we can trust, and not every single user can become an IT expert to run and operate his own IT system. So we need much more services. I think that's a huge market, which will all our SMEs, that they get appropriate support. We have to think about new service offerings for them, that we build a resilient and stable IT infrastructure, IT and data management infrastructure, that's for sure. For the second part, discussing what are the appropriate technology areas, defining something top-down, I'm not a believer on this. I think we will not find an appropriate answer. What I think could be cool, which is not yet there, if we give the freedom, that's the advantage of Europe. We have different nations, different countries in different areas of Europe, that at the end we need skills and scalable skills and critical mass of know-how and technology. It would make sense that individual countries take specific priorities in specific areas, having then an understanding that we are in a common market where a lot of exchange of information, skills, know-how and people really takes place. So here we would be able to build on Europe, and this could be built up bottom-up. So it should develop dependent on what we said at the beginning. It needs an ecosystem, you need actors, you need research, you need companies, and those which are developing properly should sit on something, perhaps much more solar power in Greece, because you have more sun in the northern part, I don't know, or you have the sea and all this stuff. So there are different countries, and they should spend their priorities on their areas, and so together we can build a portfolio of competences in Europe.
Mm-hmm. Ralf, your opinion?
I think I have to be humble here, because I'm more an expert in the fields of our companies operating in. But if I look at it from a resilience and sovereignty perspective, I think we pretty much know as we speak where we are falling short on doing things and being dependent. Right? And it goes far beyond technology. I think it's, if you go to raw earth materials, there's only one country, practically speaking, mining them. Right? So I think we also have to go back to the mining sector eventually, right? If you want to have a little bit more independency or find different partnerships. So the key question is to what you said earlier is, well, how to turn a legacy system. And Europe has a very strong legacy system. And the very difficult thing for the European Commission is to support that legacy system as well, because there's a lot of people working in the legacy system. You cannot switch from one day to the other to everything else. So, but that's the same thing for companies. So if G&D would only be active in the field of banknotes, we would only have 10% of the revenue. So, and somehow my job is to make sure that we widen that scope. But we have to support the legacy. Otherwise, but if the legacy doesn't make sense anymore, we have to shut it down, right? But as long as it makes sense, of course we support it. So, but in a nutshell, you asked me about things. I'm too humble here to state that, but as again, I think when we know where we are vulnerable, we should invest. Certainly, cybersecurity, technology, IT, software, internet is one of the areas where we have to invest as Europe. Otherwise, we are really a digital colony.
To prevent this, hopefully we will master this. But we have a question from the chat. Is privacy a matter of technology or a policy decision? I think this is a question for Martin.
Ooh la la. Before I get into this, I just wanted to still say that I'm very encouraged to hear of this G&D EIB co-investment facility, and I'd really love to learn more from it, because maybe this in itself can be scaled up.
Yeah. Why don't we schedule a telco with our ventures
you.
team, and we just share of what we do?
And make it bigger, so that, because we need bigger investments.
And then just to also to agree on what was said last about the what we in Europe call strategic autonomy, that the geopolitical context is changing rapidly, and I think it has now really everybody has now heard the signals and drawn their conclusions. Just as one example, we are now here in Europe negotiating a CHIPS Act, which is a large co-investment program for repatriating part of the semiconductor value chain back to Europe. And this is because we see, the obvious commercial and geopolitical risks, and the two dimensions combined pose an immense risk. If there were political escalation between China and Taiwan, we might end up without the right supply in microelectronics, which would completely stifle our entire industry. So I think the chips is just one example. So this discussion is taking place in Brussels, but we do need, let's say, the strategic input from the stakeholders that signal basically, future dependencies or future risks. And again, it's about kind of setting up an ecosystem, setting up fora where this kind of public-private interaction can take place. Privacy preserving, is it a regulatory or is it a tech solution? Let me also add the cultural dimension, and I think in Europe, and then I think speaking to an event which takes place in Germany, the cultural issue on privacy is also is probably, for me, it's more important than the technology or the regulation. If there is, let's say, of course, everybody wants to protect their privacy. Nobody wants to have, a situation like in other parts of the world where there's a social credit system and basically almost complete surveillance. Nobody wants that. And it's clear, and Europe's basically distinguishing factor needs to be that there is this freedom and there's a kind of a functioning society and functioning social services and a functioning economy without this kind of these privacy kind of infringements. Nevertheless, if we become too conservative and too risk averse, we will certainly also miss out on the next wave of innovations. So I think there's a balance to be struck, and I think the balance is also to be struck in our collective minds and values. Now, technology, I think, is an enabler. We have plenty of research projects focusing on privacy-preserving technology. My layman's impression is that we develop all these nice tools coming out of research projects, and then they're not taken up. And they're not taken up because the gadgets and the applications, they don't connect. I mean, they come from somewhere else. They're what counts, and they don't connect to these privacy-preserving technologies. So I think technology is an enabler, but not more than that. On the regulatory side, I think we have, when it comes to privacy and when it comes to data protection, of course, Europe is a global standard setter, mostly for better, maybe sometimes also for worse. And that goes back to what I said earlier about conservatism. But so, I mean, don't expect major revolutions on the regulatory side on privacy and data protection, I mean, in the bigger picture. Let me also mention the Cyber Resilience Act, Gabi, unless you want to come back to that later on, which is a regulatory approach on cybersecurity. And it may have a similar effect as the GDPR when it comes to driving markets and driving, basically increasing the size of the market for providing cybersecurity know-how and services and technology. But maybe we come to that later. Thank you.
Thanks. Maybe a comment from my side. I think that if we have the right for privacy and we don't have the technology, if we're using Apple and so, then our data is somewhere. So technology is an enabler, correct? But technology made in Europe that also says all this ethical value and whatever, also to realize it. And I think what we're missing is technology made in Europe that is developed according to these all, good ethical values that we have. Otherwise, at home, what do we have? Alexa, Siri, and whatever. Better, so surveillance of our homes has never been, or for the citizens, has never been so much hard and big as we have it here. And everybody's taking this. So, and data is the new oil, so we need data from AI perspective, from the research area. We know how humble, or we are searching for data so that our algorithms can train and can be built, and we cannot get the data. So, because of issues. So we cannot develop algorithms in this way, and this better as Google and all this are doing with our data. So we are feeding with our data also the algorithms and the tools and the development in the US. So not sure how we can solve this, because it's correct, regulatory is one part, but I think we need, maybe we say it, a Marshall Plan for the European industry. So really to push it in terms not to be, well, maybe, as I said, 10 years ago, the difference was not so big to the tech as we have it now. And in 10 years more, maybe we are not existent anymore. So, from the technology point of view, not from other parts. So the question is certainly, can we have it in 1-2 recommendations? We will come to the Cyber Resilience Act term, but maybe from this part, 1-2 recommendations that we can give Martin for the Commission to write it down and to implement. We had one very good, as Ralf said, this co-investment. I think this is a really good part, but make it bigger in scale. But maybe another part. So I start with Ralf.
I can only try to give an example of what we are working on. We are working with national banks, central banks of countries for digitalizing their physical currency. So central bank digital currency is not a Bitcoin, but the digital equivalent of the physical notes issued by central banks. So the ECB made a study in Europe that privacy is something very important, that people don't want to be traced on what they pay for. I think we are all not shy of giving our data to Google and to PayPal and whoever, right? That's when we have no problem eventually. But when it comes to physical currency, that is obviously an issue. However, I think the technology and the algorithms we have developed and protocols we have developed is that you can make an anonymous payment digitally. It's possible. However, now regulators come into play, and I think they have a good right to do that, because if a bank, a European bank, Crédit Agricole, Deutsche Bank, or whoever, or Banco Santander, have KYC processes and somebody wants to transfer 10,000 euros to somebody else, he has to provide an identity. Countries today have different levels of what that amount is, but I guess this is a nice example of how you can bridge things. Do you want to regulate every single transaction with privacy? God, I sometimes also think if hackers want to just look at my private email account and say, let them look at that, right, with all the spam stuff and so on, have fun with that. But my crown jewels I protect. So for transactions which go to a certain value, well, let people do it. Why to trace it? And who is doing something with the data? If it goes to above a certain amount, yeah, I think it makes sense from a tax evasion crime perspective in order to check it. Also from those who are the intermediaries later for a digital currency, like commercial banks or telco providers or payment service providers. So probably there is something which can bridge that, not everything, not every single piece. is private, right? But as of a certain point, you have to open for public security. So that's a very specific example, I know. I'm not sure how that can be transferred to other things. But sometimes specific examples eventually help to bridge the gap.
So keep it simple more in terms of KISS principle.
Yeah.
Helmut, what would you, 1, 2 recommendations
for Martin?
A very
simple recommendation. As I said, we have the basic research, we have the scientists, universities. Then we have invented something like applied research. There is the idea, so I'm part of this community, that you have to bridge the gap between the science, the knowledge, and the market. That's a good approach, and I love it, I like it, it's working, but it's not enough. So since if I have one wish and one recommendation, I'm very close involved in Austria in this quantum encryption project in the Digital Bureau program, and that's a good example. So without this Digital Bureau program, what the community and the European Commission was a very strong driver in it, when they didn't implement this method of the Digital Euro program and implementing now one step further, we are now far away from research, it's implementing technology. But there are so many open questions for the users of the technology, for the public authorities which are using it, regulatory issues, law issues. As long as these issues are not solved, the technology is not appropriate, the solution is not appropriate. And only applied research as a term is too less. So we have to go, I believe, one step further, not completely to the market. I would use the term sandboxing, going much more closer to the market, still with our understanding. It's still risky, but it's not basic research, it's close to the market, and it's possible. Researchers, scientists, engineers, universities, companies, and public authorities are coming together. Let us try now this new technology and let us see what other problems around have to be decided to develop, which are non-technical, from regulation to laws to cultural issues. I think in this we need much more to help the scientific communities to bring their knowledge onto the market at the end. And at the end we are generating by such a mechanism at the end a market. And so companies and startups find their value to jump in, and so an ecosystem is starting. Okay.
Evangelos, what would you say?
Yeah, so I said a couple of ideas, but I will repeat them, in a summary mode. So for me, the most important thing is this scalability problem. I have seen, European Investment Bank and others, demanding a return on investment, And this is maybe for established companies that they have, the assets, but in a lot of startups, practically the risk is very high, and there are no return on investments promised, So, and unless there is a return on investment, a lot of organizations like EIB and others don't invest. So here we need to think a little bit along these lines. What kind of instruments can we bring on the table, which are beyond, the traditional financing mechanisms? So we might even lose all the money, So and the investors should be very comfortable with this possibility, as the angels, the seed investors, in the States do. So, and I don't know if this is a private responsibility or it is a public or both, but this is something, that is quite important. The second recommendation is to consolidate the research areas, not to spread thin, not to do too many things, but identify a couple of important areas where we believe Europe can make an impact, and put maybe enough money, and work together, public and private. The third recommendation that I will do is to simplify, the regulatory, economic environment for the startups. I know that in a lot of countries still there are a lot of legal impediments. People don't know how to create a startup. There are, legal barriers, in the different investment, rounds. So this is something, that maybe can be fixed, and also give incentives, to a lot of people, to researchers, to entrepreneurs and so on, to take the risks. I'll give you a very funny story. Almost 22 years ago, I've been in Norway, in Trondheim, and in the middle of the university there were 3 very expensive cars. And then I asked the guys, why they have these very expensive Mercedes, and I said, people, are not very keen to create their own company, I mean, still we have a very nice quality of life in Europe, and a lot of people, don't take the risk, to make companies. I have lived the last 10, 15 years in a country which was a lot under pressure, with the crisis. People used to have very, very low salaries. So now there is a huge, spread of startups, a lot of youngsters, taking the risk because basically they have nothing to lose. So this is an important message, I mean, we shouldn't reach a crisis, for us to go into the startups, but, create a culture, give incentives, to a lot of people like here, and give them the opportunity to somehow to succeed, but also to fail. And understand that failure is part of the improvement process, and accept this as a major achievement. I don't know, maybe I'm asking too much. And the fourth recommendation that I will do is about creating talents, creating capacity. If we don't solve this problem, if we don't create more talented people, it will be impossible, to meet the demand. With the new telework regimes, US companies are recruiting people, globally. We have difficulty to sustain our talents, and that will be definitely an important challenge for us to grow. This scalability problem, will hit us soon.
Very good. So Martin is writing everything down, all the problems, but I think it's a lot of part. Very good. To be more simple, fast regulatory incentives, and I think keep it easy and simple, really to say open a startup, make it, and I could only support this. And I hear it a lot also from my network that young people are just going to the US and say much easier to make a startup as here with all the regulations, and if I fail, then what happens then? I think we need to come over to this part. And well, maybe we will feel forced because Cyber Resilience Act is certainly a part of it, but is it really the answer to the cyber resilience challenge? It's a regulatory, but the question is it enough? And opinions about, Ralf? What would you say? How would you comment this?
I would compare it with ESG. Is ESG solving the climate problems of the planet? Of course not. It's only what happens afterwards, right? And let's say, because I have the two areas reporting to me, information security, but also ESG. And coming from a company with a legacy system, you first think in ESG, okay, how to do less harm to the planet, right? To optimize here and there. Before you shift it to doing more good things, it takes a while, right? ESG was pushing it, but still it takes time to resolve issues and to really turn it around and figure out on different things, not the same things optimized, right? And I think this is the same as the Cyber Resilience Act. It's a regulation and it takes time to realize it. Until you have legacy systems turned around, it takes a long time. Yeah, it's optimization, and until you have new things built based on the idea of the Cyber Resilience Act, it will gradually move forward, but it takes time. So it will not solve all the problems.
Do we have the time?
Well, you know that the digital race is very fast, right? So in practical life, of course, you don't have the time, but in reality, we will need time to change it.
Okay, Helmut?
So just a little bit to complement what you just said. It's a portfolio of activities. So I think what I experience as strong market drivers is the NIS2 directive. I'm involved in there, and I see a strong discussion between public authorities, lawmakers, regulatory policymakers, but also manufacturers, solution providers. We're sitting together and we're thinking, how can we solve this law? It's a driver, so it's a market driver because you have to do it, because there is, I think it's cool. Regulation is always, and laws are always important drivers. There is a second example in the automotive context, where we have the United Nations regulatory scheme that by 2024, from a digital point of view, all the new cars which want to be get a certification have to follow specific digital certification processes. So as far as I understand, it's a kind of bottom-up approach that the industry on its own defined this in Europe. So that's an important market driver, and many solutions are now asked because are looked for, because you have then to manage this tremendous expectation, process management, skill management. It cannot be done with pencils and paper, so they are looking for tools. And this is generating a new market where solution providers can now enter the scene. Startups, for example, we have funded one with an AIT based on this subject. So these drivers are helping. It's a starting point. Secondly, I would say it needs more. I think we should not wait at the end, especially in the business context. I think it will be crucial for a business success not to be intervened by somebody else, either that your IPRs are stolen or your customers are stolen. It's not funny because everything is now on a digital platform, so it should become a very crucial basic idea for everybody. It's the basic to survive in a business and private context. I think here we have to work together. We are doing it. Projects like Concordia and other competence networks are working in this direction. We have to explain much more. It's crucial. Stay on it. Jump on it as a customer, and then again, it's a certain level that the market is generated and solutions will come immediately afterwards.
Okay. Evangelos, Cyber Resilient Act?
Yes, I think whoever tried to make his house, smart knows very well, how difficult it is to deal with a lot of connected devices. So vulnerabilities, problems with the firmware, they don't work well. Sometimes they are connected, sometimes they don't connect. A lot of us are honestly spending our weekends, trying to fix these problems. So the Cyber Resilience Act comes actually to solve this problem and say to all these manufacturers, guys, come on. You cannot just produce products, and compete on the market with the cheapest price. You have to bring some basic quality. You have to adhere to some basic security principles. And we don't demand this for all products, but definitely for some risky products, important products that are supporting critical services, we might need to even certify them. And for others, definitely there is a need, for a self-assessment. So I remember a couple of years ago, this famous, telecom routers, problem. And there are many other, examples like this where basically nobody knew what to do, and the company also said, this is not my responsibility. So in my opinion, here the Commission takes a very bold initiative to solve a problem and also to raise the level of security of a lot of these products which are coming in the market without appropriate security, and also push a little bit the national authorities to take ownership and responsibility in somehow supervising these products or, checking what kind of products are circulating in the European market. So it will solve the end devices. It is only a small problem of the whole architecture. We still need to have the other components, the connectivity, the 5G. We still need to have a proper, identity management system. We still have to consider the cloud where the data are stored, and we still have to discuss about the artificial intelligence and the data. So CRA is a part of the ecosystem. It will not solve all the problems, but definitely it deals with the end devices. And when these devices are in critical processes, in critical systems, then they are very, very important. And there, we have to be very careful, how we deploy them.
Okay, thanks. But so far we are not good at the cloud. We are not at 5G good. We actually are limited in various fields. Yeah. But maybe Martin has a solution for all of this. Martin, it's your turn.
No pressure. No, I mean, I don't have that much to add. Just to let you know, I mean, first, on the previous round, indeed, I've been taking good notes. Many of the challenges and recommendations, let's say I heard before, and people are working on it. Others, not yet. And again, I took note. And again, I'm inviting, let's say, input through our stakeholder engagement structures. On the CRA, just to say one thing, we did not take this lightly. Okay, I think when I started in cybersecurity, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 years ago, one of the first things that came onto my desk was, duty of care, and already at the time there was the need was identified. But as quick as we are in proposing a new initiative or proposing a new forum or proposing a new structure, this one we really did not take it lightly. Hopefully we end up with a balanced regulation which achieves the impact, which is the resilience, which maybe also as a byproduct fosters the market for cybersecurity and increases the overall awareness of cybersecurity for cybersecurity. But there is also an issue of the compliance cost. This regulation will apply very, very widely. So again, I just hope for a really balanced, I hope for an informed legislative discussion, and I hope for a balanced outcome. And then, as Evangelos points out, then it comes to implementation. And the nicest regulation is not worth much if the implementation does not live up to it. So lots of challenges, but I think indeed it was a very important step. And again, we did not take it lightly. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the discussion so far. We are at the end of the panel, and I think we should have discussed much more time in terms really what are the next steps and so on. But I think we should never miss a crisis. We should take the opportunities to come out of our comfort zone and make progress in terms of really building European industry in IT. And I would really like to thank all my panelists here. Thanks again for the big applause. We did not provide solutions, but I think discussing terms, bringing people together, it's important, and Concordia is bringing a lot of people together, building an ecosystem. I think we found a way how to make ecosystems as a blueprint, and hopefully we will meet also after Concordia, the last time probably in Stockholm with Shahid, but also afterwards, because it's necessary to bring this further to make it as sustainable, also the investment that we are doing in research and collaboration, and so also to the next step. Looking forward to this, and thanks again for the really nice discussion. Thanks again.